Metamorphosis is a story written by Franz Kafka, one of the most influential writers of the 20th century. This story tells the life of a man named Gregor Samsa, a traveling salesman who lives a life of routine and responsibility. Every day, Gregor wakes up early, goes to work, and struggles to provide for his family. He works tirelessly because he feels it is his duty to support them, even though he often feels tired, lonely, and underappreciated. Gregor's life appears ordinary on the surface, but beneath that ordinary life lies a deep sense of alienation and dissatisfaction. Kafka uses Gregor's life to show how people can feel trapped by obligations, societal expectations, and the pressures of family responsibilities. One morning, something extraordinary happens. Gregor wakes up and discovers that his body has transformed into a giant insect. This sudden and shocking change marks the beginning of his journey, and it serves as the central event that challenges everything he knew about himself, his family, and the world. At first, Gregor is confused and frightened, and he tries to continue his daily routine despite his new form. He worries about being late to work, about how his family will react, and about the financial consequences of his condition. Even in this extreme situation, he clings to his sense of duty, showing how deeply human concerns about responsibility and obligation are ingrained. Kafka does not focus only on the physical transformation of Gregor. He explores the psychological and emotional impact of being alienated from oneself and from others. The story reveals the loneliness and fear that come with feeling different or misunderstood. Gregor's transformation acts as a metaphor for the ways in which people can feel trapped by life circumstances, isolated by society, or disconnected from those they love. His family, who initially relies on him, reacts with a mixture of concern, frustration, and eventually resentment, showing how relationships can change when someone can no longer fulfill expected roles. Through this story, Kafka invites readers to reflect on their own lives and relationships. We are encouraged to consider what happens when change disrupts the familiar, when our bodies, our roles, or our identities are no longer what they once were. The story also raises questions about human empathy, compassion, and the ability to adapt to circumstances beyond our control. It asks whether love and loyalty are unconditional, or whether they depend on the usefulness and conformity of the person we care for. Metamorphosis is not just a story about a man turning into an insect. It is a story about human existence, the fragility of identity, and the vulnerability of those who are different. It teaches us that life can change suddenly, sometimes in ways we cannot predict or control. It shows us the emotional and psychological challenges that come with change and the importance of understanding, patience, and empathy. As we move from this introduction into the lessons of the story, the first lesson becomes clear. Life can change in unexpected ways, and the way we respond to sudden transformations shapes our experience. Gregor's journey teaches us the importance of adapting to change, even when it feels impossible or frightening. It reminds us that every challenge brings an opportunity to learn, grow, and discover new aspects of ourselves. In the next lesson, we will explore facing unexpected change and see how Gregor's shocking transformation provides insights into resilience, adaptability, and the human response to life's surprises. Lesson 1. Facing unexpected change. The first lesson from Metamorphosis is that life can change in ways we never imagine. Gregor Samsa wakes up one morning to discover that his body has transformed into a giant insect. This sudden and shocking event completely disrupts his ordinary life and forces him to face an entirely new reality. Kafka uses this transformation not just as a physical change, but as a symbol of how unpredictable life can be. Gregor's initial reaction is confusion and fear. He struggles to understand what has happened and worries about how to manage his responsibilities despite his new form. Even though he is physically transformed, his mind remains human, and he is still deeply concerned about his family's well-being and his job. This shows us that when life throws unexpected challenges at us, our priorities and responsibilities do not disappear. The lesson here is that change can be sudden, unavoidable, and often uncomfortable. It can disrupt routines, alter relationships, and make us feel powerless. However, the way we respond to such changes defines our experience. Gregor's attempts to adapt, even in the face of fear and confusion, illustrate the importance of resilience and acceptance. We also learn that unexpected change often forces us to reevaluate our lives. Gregor is no longer able to work or perform the daily tasks he once took for granted. This creates an opportunity for him, and for us as readers, to reflect on the aspects of life we assume will always remain constant. It teaches the value of flexibility and the ability to let go of control when circumstances are beyond our power. This lesson is universal. Every person faces moments when life changes abruptly, whether through illness, loss, career shifts, or personal challenges. How we respond to these moments, whether with resistance, despair, or acceptance, shapes our resilience and growth. Gregor's story reminds us that we cannot always predict or prevent change, but we can choose how to meet it. Facing unexpected change also involves emotional courage. Gregor experiences fear, sadness, and frustration, yet he continues to think about his family and tries to maintain some sense of normalcy. This teaches that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Life's transformations, whether big or small, require us to confront uncertainty and adapt with patience and awareness. In essence, the first lesson from Metamorphosis is that change is inevitable. Life is unpredictable, and challenges can appear without warning. By observing Gregor's journey, we learn that resilience, adaptability, and emotional strength are essential skills. The ability to face unexpected change with awareness and courage can help us navigate even the most difficult circumstances. Lesson 2. Understanding isolation. The second lesson from Metamorphosis is about isolation and the impact it has on a person's life. After Gregor's transformation, he finds himself separated from his family and the world he once knew. He can no longer communicate with them, and they struggle to understand what he has become. This sudden separation creates a deep sense of loneliness, highlighting how fragile human connections can be. Isolation is not only physical, but also emotional. Even when Gregor is in the same room as his family, he feels invisible and misunderstood. His family sees him as a burden rather than as the son and brother they once knew. This demonstrates that when someone becomes different or cannot meet expectations, relationships can change quickly. We learn that isolation is often not about being alone, but about feeling disconnected and unseen. The story also shows that isolation can lead to reflection. Alone in his room, Gregor has time to think about his life, his choices, and his role in the family. He reflects on the pressures he faced before his transformation and realizes how much his identity depended on his work and usefulness. This teaches us that periods of isolation, though difficult, can encourage self-awareness and personal growth. At the same time, isolation can bring pain and suffering. Gregor feels sadness and despair as he becomes more separated from his family and the outside world. He longs for connection and struggles with feelings of rejection. This reminds us that humans are social beings, and relationships are essential for emotional well-being. When those bonds are broken, even temporarily, it can create deep emotional challenges. Kafka also shows that isolation tests empathy and compassion. Gregor's sister initially cares for him, feeding him and cleaning his room. However, as time passes, even her patience begins to fade. This illustrates that sustaining empathy in the face of prolonged difficulty is hard but necessary. The story teaches us to be mindful of those who are isolated or suffering, even when it is inconvenient. Another key aspect of this lesson is understanding the perspective of others. Gregor's family struggles with fear, shame, and confusion. They are isolated in their own way, dealing with the challenge of a situation they do not fully comprehend. This reminds us that isolation can affect everyone involved, and that compassion requires seeing the world through multiple viewpoints. In life, we all face moments of isolation. It can come through illness, personal differences, or life circumstances that separate us from familiar people or routines. Gregor's story shows that while isolation can be painful, it also provides lessons about resilience, empathy, and self-understanding. We learn to value human connection, to practice patience, and to reflect on our own inner strength when we are alone. In essence, the second lesson from Metamorphosis is that isolation is both a challenge and a teacher. It can bring loneliness and suffering, but it also opens a space for reflection and empathy. By understanding isolation through Gregor's experience, we become more aware of our relationships and more compassionate toward those who are misunderstood or alone. Lesson 3. The burden of responsibility. The third lesson from Metamorphosis is about the burden of responsibility and the ways it shapes our lives. Before his transformation, Gregor works tirelessly as a traveling salesman to support his family. He carries the weight of providing for them, paying debts, and maintaining their lifestyle. Even though he is exhausted and longing for rest, he continues to work because he feels it is his duty. After becoming an insect, Gregor's sense of responsibility does not disappear. He immediately worries about missing work and how his family will manage without his income. He struggles to move and feed himself, yet his mind remains preoccupied with their needs. This teaches us that the sense of responsibility is deeply human, and it often persists even when circumstances make it impossible to fulfill. Kafka shows that responsibility can be both noble and burdensome. Gregor's dedication to his family demonstrates love, loyalty, and selflessness. However, it also brings stress, exhaustion, and a lack of personal freedom. The story reminds us that caring for others is important, but it should not come at the expense of our own health and well-being. This lesson also highlights how responsibilities define identity. Gregor's family sees him primarily as the provider. When he can no longer work, their perception of him changes. This reflects the harsh reality that human value is often measured by usefulness and performance rather than inherent worth. We learn that relying solely on external roles to define ourselves can make life fragile and unstable. The burden of responsibility also affects relationships. Gregor's family depends on him financially and emotionally, yet they are unprepared to deal with his inability to fulfill those roles. This causes tension, disappointment, and eventually resentment. We see that responsibility is not only about duty, but also about the expectations others place upon us. Balancing these expectations with self-care is essential to avoid emotional collapse. Responsibility can inspire courage and resilience. Even in the face of his transformation, Gregor tries to protect his family from worry and continues to think about their well-being. This demonstrates that true responsibility is not just about action, but about intention and care. It is the awareness of how our choices affect others and the willingness to act despite difficulty. At the same time, Kafka warns against excessive self-sacrifice. Gregor neglects his own needs and suffers greatly as a result. The story teaches that while dedication and loyalty are virtues, they have limits. Ignoring personal health, happiness, or dignity for the sake of duty can lead to suffering and alienation. In essence, the third lesson from Metamorphosis is that responsibility is a double-edged sword. It brings meaning, purpose, and connection, but it can also create pressure, stress, and vulnerability. Gregor's journey encourages us to reflect on the responsibilities we carry, the balance between duty and self-care, and the ways in which these responsibilities shape our identity and relationships. Lesson 4. Family dynamics can change. The fourth lesson from Metamorphosis is about family dynamics and how relationships can change under pressure. Before Gregor's transformation, his family relies on him for financial support, emotional stability, and daily order. He works tirelessly to provide for them, and they accept this as normal, often taking his sacrifices for granted. Life seems predictable, with defined roles for each family member. When Gregor becomes an insect, everything shifts. The family must confront a reality they did not expect, and their roles begin to change. His sister, initially caring and supportive, takes on the responsibility of feeding and cleaning for him. His parents struggle with fear, confusion, and frustration, uncertain of how to respond to the new situation. This shows that unexpected challenges can quickly reveal the strengths and weaknesses of relationships. Kafka illustrates that loyalty and love are often tested during crises. The family's initial concern for Gregor slowly turns into resentment and avoidance. They begin to see him not as their loved one, but as a burden, someone who disrupts their comfort and routine. This demonstrates how easily relationships can be strained when individuals fail to meet expectations or when circumstances become difficult. Family dynamics are also shaped by fear and social perception. Gregor's father reacts with aggression. His mother is torn between care and anxiety, and his sister struggles to maintain control over the household. This reminds us that people often act out of fear, stress, and societal pressure, rather than pure malice. It teaches the importance of empathy and patience in family relationships, especially when situations challenge the familiar balance. Another key lesson is that change in one member affects the entire family. Gregor's transformation forces the family to find new ways to survive, work, and relate to one another. It shows that family is an interconnected system, and disruption in one part inevitably impacts all members. This can lead to growth, adaptation, or conflict, depending on how the family responds. Kafka also emphasizes the fragility of human expectations. Before the transformation, the family's love and reliance on Gregor were conditional on his ability to provide and perform. When he no longer fulfills that role, they struggle to see him as valuable or lovable. This teaches us that genuine family support should be based on understanding and acceptance, not only on usefulness or duty. In essence, the fourth lesson from Metamorphosis is that family dynamics are fluid. Crises and unexpected challenges reveal hidden truths about loyalty, love, patience, and selfishness. Gregor's story encourages us to reflect on our own family relationships and consider how we respond when the roles we expect are disrupted. It reminds us to cultivate empathy, open communication, and resilience within our families. Lesson 5. The pain of being misunderstood. The fifth lesson from Metamorphosis is about the pain and frustration of being misunderstood. After Gregor's transformation, he loses the ability to speak in a way that his family can understand. Even when he tries to express his thoughts, emotions, or intentions, they cannot hear him. This creates a profound sense of isolation and helplessness, showing how vital communication is to human connection. Being misunderstood affects Gregor emotionally and mentally. He feels sadness, frustration, and even despair because his family interprets his actions incorrectly. Simple gestures are misread, and his attempts to show care are often seen as strange or threatening. Kafka uses this to illustrate a universal truth. When we cannot make others understand our perspective, we feel alienated and alone. The story also highlights that misunderstanding can create fear and tension. Gregor's family reacts with confusion, worry, and eventually irritation. They do not know how to respond, and their lack of understanding leads to emotional distance. This reminds us that misunderstanding is not always caused by malice, but by differences in perception, language, or circumstance. It teaches the importance of patience and the willingness to see beyond first impressions. Being misunderstood can also influence self-perception. Gregor begins to question his own value and place in the family and the world. He struggles with feelings of guilt, shame, and inadequacy because others cannot recognize his intentions or efforts. This shows how much our sense of self can depend on how others perceive and understand us. It encourages reflection on personal identity and the resilience needed when validation is lacking. Kafka also demonstrates the emotional complexity of human relationships through this lesson. Even in love and care, there can be misinterpretation and miscommunication. Gregor's family loves him in their own way, but they are unable to fully comprehend his needs or feelings. This teaches us that empathy requires active listening, patience, and imagination. Understanding another person's perspective is often harder than it seems, but it is essential for meaningful connection. The pain of being misunderstood is a common human experience. It can occur in families, friendships, workplaces, and society at large. Through Gregor's struggle, we learn that compassion and effort to communicate clearly can alleviate misunderstanding. We are reminded to be observant, empathetic, and thoughtful when interacting with others, especially when they are different from us. In essence, the fifth lesson from Metamorphosis is that being misunderstood is deeply painful but also instructive. It teaches the value of patience, empathy, and the courage to express oneself despite the risk of misinterpretation. Gregor's experience encourages us to consider how we listen, perceive, and respond to those around us. It reminds us that human connection is fragile and must be nurtured with understanding and care. Lesson 6. Personal identity is fragile. The sixth lesson from Metamorphosis is about personal identity and how fragile it can be. Before his transformation, Gregor's identity is closely tied to his work, his responsibilities, and his role within the family. He defines himself as a provider, a dutiful son, and a reliable worker. These external roles shape his sense of worth and purpose. When he wakes up as an insect, those defining roles are stripped away. He can no longer go to work or interact with society in the same way. His family begins to see him as a burden rather than as the person they once knew. This sudden loss of roles and recognition shakes his sense of self. It shows that identity, when based primarily on external validation, can be fragile and vulnerable to change. Kafka uses Gregor's experience to explore the tension between who we are and what we do. Our jobs, titles, and responsibilities can give structure to life, but they do not define the entirety of who we are. When circumstances change, identity built solely on these external factors can crumble. This teaches that true self-awareness and inner understanding are essential to withstand life's unexpected transformations. Personal identity is also linked to perception. Gregor still thinks of himself as human, kind, and dutiful, but his family no longer recognizes those qualities. This mismatch between self-perception and how others see us can create confusion, sadness, and even a sense of invisibility. We learn that self-worth should not depend entirely on external approval, but also on an internal sense of values and purpose. The story also illustrates the struggle between adaptation and self-acceptance. Gregor tries to continue caring for his family despite his new form, hoping to maintain his identity as a responsible and loving son. Yet his body and abilities limit him, and he cannot fully fulfill the role he once had. This highlights that identity is not static. It is tested by circumstances and must evolve in response to life's challenges. Kafka's exploration of fragile identity also raises questions about what it means to be human. Is identity defined by work, appearance, or the opinions of others, or is it something deeper within? Gregor's journey forces readers to consider the importance of inner values, resilience, and self-recognition beyond societal expectations. It teaches that understanding and accepting ourselves is a crucial step in navigating change and hardship. In essence, the sixth lesson from Metamorphosis is that personal identity is delicate and can be challenged by life events. We learn that our sense of self should not rely solely on external roles or approval, but on our inner character, values, and awareness. Gregor's story encourages reflection on who we are beneath responsibilities and appearances, and how we maintain a sense of worth when everything external changes. Lesson 7. Empathy and compassion matter. The seventh lesson from Metamorphosis is about empathy and compassion and how they shape human relationships. Gregor's transformation makes him completely dependent on others for care and understanding. At first, his sister Greta shows genuine concern, feeding him, cleaning his room, and trying to make his life more comfortable. These acts of kindness highlight the importance of empathy in helping someone who is suffering. Empathy allows people to connect even when circumstances are difficult or strange. Greta's willingness to care for her brother demonstrates that small gestures of understanding can have a profound impact. Even when she is unsure of how to respond, her compassion provides Gregor with comfort and a sense of connection. This shows that human relationships rely on the ability to see the world from another person's perspective. Compassion is also about consistency and effort. At the beginning, Greta's actions reflect love and care, but over time, her patience begins to fade as the burden becomes heavier. This illustrates that empathy requires emotional strength and sustained effort, especially when supporting someone through long-term challenges. It reminds us that caring for others is not always easy, but it is essential for meaningful human connection. Kafka also shows that empathy and compassion are not limited to family. The story encourages readers to consider how we respond to anyone who is vulnerable or different. Acts of understanding and kindness, even if small, can reduce suffering and provide emotional support. They help maintain dignity, humanity, and connection in situations where isolation and fear are overwhelming. Another important aspect of this lesson is recognizing the limits of empathy. While Greta shows compassion, there are moments when she struggles to continue caring as her own needs and frustrations grow. This teaches that empathy does not mean neglecting oneself. True compassion involves balancing care for others with self-care to maintain emotional resilience. Empathy also requires awareness and imagination. Gregor cannot speak in human language, yet he still tries to communicate his feelings and needs. Understanding him requires effort, observation, and sensitivity. This demonstrates that empathy is active, not passive. It is the willingness to look beyond appearances, assumptions, or surface behavior to truly see another person's experience. In essence, the seventh lesson from Metamorphosis is that empathy and compassion are vital for human connection. They allow us to support those in need, alleviate suffering, and maintain meaningful relationships. Gregor's story reminds us that even small acts of kindness matter, and that understanding others requires patience, imagination, and emotional strength. By practicing empathy and compassion, we create a more humane and supportive world. Lesson 8. Society can be cruel. The eighth lesson from Metamorphosis is about how society can be cruel and judgmental. Gregor's transformation does not only affect his family, but also highlights the reactions of people around him. Even though he is still human in thought and feeling, society and those who interact with him see only the strange insect form. This teaches that people often judge and reject what they do not understand. Kafka shows that societal expectations are rigid and unforgiving. Gregor had been a productive worker, fulfilling his role as a provider and contributing to society. Yet, when he can no longer perform these roles, he becomes invisible and unwanted. This reflects the harsh reality that society often values people based on their usefulness or conformity rather than their inherent humanity. The story also illustrates how fear drives cruelty. Gregor's family reacts with frustration and even aggression because they are afraid, confused, and overwhelmed by the situation. Similarly, society tends to isolate or exclude individuals who are different, unusual, or unable to meet conventional standards. This reminds us that judgment often comes not from personal dislike, but from discomfort with the unfamiliar. Being rejected by society can be deeply painful and alienating. Gregor experiences not only physical isolation, but also emotional rejection, as those around him fail to recognize his feelings, intentions, and humanity. This teaches us that cruelty can be subtle, appearing as neglect, avoidance, or misunderstanding, and not always as direct hostility. Kafka also emphasizes the importance of perspective and awareness. Seeing the world through Gregor's eyes, readers understand the impact of societal judgment on an individual. It encourages reflection on how we treat those who are different, marginalized, or struggling. We are reminded that kindness and acceptance are often rare but essential in countering societal cruelty. This lesson also highlights the danger of defining people by their function or status. When Gregor cannot work or maintain his previous roles, society, and even his family begin to see him as disposable. It teaches that human worth should not depend solely on performance or conformity. Respect, empathy, and understanding are necessary to uphold dignity and humanity. In essence, the eighth lesson from Metamorphosis is that society can be unforgiving and judgmental, but awareness, compassion, and empathy can counteract this cruelty. Gregor's experience reminds us to challenge rigid norms, practice acceptance, and treat all individuals with humanity, even when they are different. By understanding the impact of societal rejection, we learn to be more mindful of the power of our judgments and the importance of inclusion. Lesson 9. Resilience is essential. The 9th lesson from Metamorphosis is about resilience and the importance of inner strength. Despite his shocking transformation and the difficulties he faces, Gregor continues to adapt and survive. He struggles with his new body, finds it hard to move, and suffers from pain and confusion. Yet he does not give up entirely. This teaches that resilience is the ability to endure and keep going even when circumstances are extremely challenging. Gregor's resilience is shown through his concern for his family. Even as he becomes an insect, he thinks about how they will manage without his income. He tries to hide his suffering, continues to care for them in his own way, and looks for ways to adjust to his new life. This shows that resilience is not just about physical survival, but also about maintaining purpose, empathy, and responsibility under pressure. Kafka also illustrates that resilience requires flexibility. Gregor cannot perform the same tasks he did before, so he adapts to his new abilities. He climbs walls, hides from his family when necessary, and seeks small comforts wherever possible. This teaches that resilience involves creativity and the ability to find solutions even when life limits our options. Emotional resilience is equally important. Gregor experiences fear, rejection, loneliness, and despair, yet he continues to navigate his life with awareness and effort. He does not completely lose hope, even as the world around him becomes harsher. This shows that inner strength comes from mental perseverance and the courage to face difficulties without surrendering to despair. Resilience also affects those around us. When people see someone persist despite hardship, it can inspire empathy, admiration, or change in attitude. However, Gregor's family eventually grows tired of his persistence, highlighting that resilience does not always guarantee recognition or reward. The lesson is that true resilience is not about others noticing or praising us. It is about enduring with dignity and effort, regardless of external validation. Kafka's story teaches that life is full of challenges that may feel overwhelming or unfair. Resilience allows us to navigate these challenges, maintain hope, and continue striving for purpose and meaning. It reminds us that even small acts of persistence, adapting to a new circumstance, caring for others despite difficulty, or finding solutions in the face of limitation, reflect strength and courage. In essence, the 9th lesson from Metamorphosis is that resilience is essential for survival, growth, and maintaining humanity. By observing Gregor's efforts, we learn that enduring hardship with awareness, flexibility, and courage is a vital skill in life. The story encourages us to cultivate resilience within ourselves, understanding that difficulties are opportunities to strengthen our character and inner resolve. Lesson 10. The limits of sacrifice. The 10th lesson from Metamorphosis is about the limits of sacrifice and how selflessness can have consequences. Gregor spends his life putting his family first. He works long hours, ignores his own comfort, and prioritizes their needs above his own. Even after his transformation, he continues to think about their well-being and tries to protect them from worry. This shows the nobility of sacrifice, but Kafka also reveals its dangers. Sacrifice becomes harmful when it ignores personal needs and health. Gregor's devotion leads him to suffer in silence, endure physical pain, and feel emotional distress. His family benefits from his care, but he bears the cost alone. This teaches us that selflessness must be balanced with self-care, otherwise it can become destructive rather than heroic. The story also highlights the conditional nature of appreciation. Gregor's sacrifices are taken for granted, and as his usefulness declines, the family begins to resent him. This shows that constant giving without attention to boundaries may not lead to gratitude, and it can even harm relationships. We learn that understanding the limits of our energy, patience, and abilities is essential when supporting others. Sacrifice is meaningful when it is intentional and sustainable. Gregor's intentions are pure, but the extreme circumstances make his selflessness unsustainable. Kafka teaches that true care involves knowing when to act and when to protect oneself. It encourages reflection on the ways we give to others and the importance of maintaining personal boundaries. Another important aspect of this lesson is recognizing when sacrifice ceases to benefit others. Gregor continues to sacrifice himself even when his family begins to distance themselves. This shows that there is a point where giving without reciprocation or appreciation can harm both the giver and the recipient. We learn to recognize the balance between generosity and self-preservation. Ultimately, Kafka's story shows that sacrifice is a double-edged sword. It can reflect love, loyalty, and courage, but it can also lead to suffering, neglect, and alienation if taken to extremes. The lesson is not to avoid selflessness, but to practice it wisely, ensuring that it aligns with personal well-being and sustainable relationships. In essence, the 10th lesson from Metamorphosis is that sacrifice has limits. We are encouraged to care for others while also caring for ourselves, understanding that balance is essential for long-term resilience, health, and meaningful relationships. Gregor's journey teaches that wisdom lies in knowing how far to give and when to step back, preserving dignity and life in the process. Lesson 11. Change reveals true character. The 11th lesson from Metamorphosis is about how change reveals the true character of people. Gregor's sudden transformation acts as a mirror, reflecting the real nature of his family and those around him. Before the change, life seemed ordinary, and appearances suggested stability, care, and affection. However, when faced with an unexpected challenge, the true qualities of each character become clear. Gregor's family reacts in different ways. His sister initially shows compassion, cleaning his room and feeding him. His mother struggles between fear and concern, unsure how to act. His father becomes aggressive, expressing frustration and anger toward Gregor. These reactions reveal courage, selfishness, patience, and fear in ways that everyday life never did. The story teaches that difficult times act as a test for relationships. Crisis exposes hidden motives, strengths, and weaknesses that are not visible during normal circumstances. What seems like love, loyalty, or support may be conditional and tested under stress. We learn that true character is revealed when comfort and convenience are removed, and when people are challenged beyond their usual limits. Kafka also emphasizes the complexity of human behavior. Even those who show selfishness or anger may also experience fear, confusion, or helplessness. True character is rarely simple. It is a mix of intentions, emotions, and actions that emerge under pressure. Understanding this complexity helps us approach others with empathy and realistic expectations. Change also reveals our own character. Gregor continues to act with care for his family, despite their increasing hostility and neglect. His persistence, empathy, and selflessness demonstrate the qualities that define him as a person beyond physical form. The story encourages reflection on how we respond when life challenges our comfort, routine, or expectations. Do we act with integrity, patience, and courage, or do we react selfishly or fearfully? Another lesson is that observing character during crises can guide our choices. Recognizing who is dependable, who is compassionate, and who may falter under stress helps us navigate relationships wisely. It teaches us that judgment and trust should be informed by actions in difficult situations, not just appearances during normal times. In essence, the 11th lesson from Metamorphosis is that change exposes the true nature of people. Crises illuminate honesty, selfishness, courage, patience, and compassion in ways that ordinary life cannot. Gregor's story reminds us to reflect on our own character and recognize the qualities of those around us. By understanding human nature in moments of challenge, we can develop empathy, wisdom, and stronger relationships. Lesson 12. Acceptance of mortality and endings. The 12th lesson from Metamorphosis is about accepting mortality and the endings that are part of life. Gregor's life ends tragically after his transformation, reflecting the inevitability of death and the limits of human existence. Throughout the story, Kafka reminds readers that life is temporary, and even the most ordinary lives can be disrupted or concluded suddenly. This teaches the importance of embracing life as it is, including its impermanence. Gregor's death is not just physical, it symbolizes the end of a chapter for his family and for himself. His body, his responsibilities, and his previous identity all cease to exist. Yet his family continues with life, moving forward despite grief, confusion, and relief. This shows that endings, while painful, are a natural part of the human experience, and acceptance allows life to continue. The story also emphasizes the emotional challenges of mortality. Gregor struggles with understanding his own existence and value in his transformed state. He experiences sadness, loneliness, and detachment as he approaches the end of his life. Kafka teaches that facing mortality requires reflection, courage, and a willingness to let go of attachment to roles, expectations, and even our physical selves. Acceptance is an important theme. Gregor does not fight his fate aggressively. Instead, he gradually succumbs to his circumstances. This demonstrates that peace often comes from acknowledging the inevitable rather than resisting it. By accepting endings, we can experience closure, release suffering, and find clarity about what truly matters. The story also reminds us of life's continuity. Even after Gregor dies, the family begins a new chapter of life. This teaches that endings, while sad, can open opportunities for renewal, growth, and hope. Mortality does not stop the world. It encourages us to live fully and value every moment, relationship, and experience. Kafka's exploration of endings also encourages reflection on legacy and memory. While Gregor's family may forget or move past him, the lessons of his life, actions, and struggles remain significant. This shows that our experiences and choices matter, even if life is finite, and acceptance allows us to leave a meaningful imprint. In essence, the 12th lesson from Metamorphosis is that accepting mortality and endings is essential to living fully. Life is temporary, and loss is inevitable, but reflection, acceptance, and understanding allow us to find peace and continue forward. Gregor's story teaches us to embrace impermanence, value the present, and recognize that every ending is also an opportunity for renewal. Lesson 13. Finding hope after loss. The 13th and final lesson from Metamorphosis is about finding hope after loss and embracing new possibilities. After Gregor's death, his family experiences a mixture of grief, relief, and uncertainty. The life they knew has ended, but a new chapter begins. Kafka shows that even after tragedy, change, or loss, there is an opportunity to rebuild, grow, and discover hope. Loss is a natural part of life, and it can feel overwhelming. Gregor's family faces the consequences of his absence, reflecting on the past and imagining the future. At first, the loss feels heavy, but gradually, they start to see possibilities beyond the pain. This teaches that hope is not about forgetting grief, but finding the strength to continue living meaningfully. The story also highlights the resilience of the human spirit. The family begins to plan for a new life, with dreams, movement, and freedom they could not explore before. Kafka emphasizes that life continues, and with time, energy, and courage, people can adapt, heal, and pursue new opportunities. Even when the world feels broken, hope allows us to envision a future that is brighter and full of potential. Finding hope after loss also requires reflection and learning. The family's experiences with Gregor's transformation teach them about compassion, responsibility, and understanding. They gain insight into themselves and each other, realizing what matters most in life. This shows that loss, though painful, can provide valuable lessons that guide future decisions and relationships. Another aspect of this lesson is the importance of moving forward. Holding on to grief indefinitely can prevent growth and adaptation. The family begins to look ahead, take small steps toward happiness, and embrace the opportunities life presents. Kafka teaches that hope is an active choice, a conscious decision to find light even after darkness. Finally, the story encourages gratitude and awareness. Even in the face of loss, life offers moments of beauty, possibility, and connection. Hope emerges when we recognize these opportunities and act on them with courage and intention. It reminds us that endings are not the conclusion of life's story, but a transition into new beginnings. In essence, the 13th lesson from Metamorphosis is that hope can be found after loss. Even when life changes dramatically, when tragedy occurs, or when challenges feel insurmountable, hope allows us to continue, grow, and embrace the future. Gregor's story encourages us to honor the past, learn from hardship, and approach life with resilience, courage, and optimism.